In 20th century USA, who was influential in psychology? How did Washburn, Sumner, and the Clarks contribute to psychology? Now we're going to talk about Margaret Floy Washburn. She is best known as the first woman to earn a PhD in psychology, a groundbreaking achievement at a time when women faced significant barriers in higher education. In 1894, Washburn earned her doctorate from Cornell University, where she studied under Edward Titchener. In fact, she was his very first PhD student. Before that, like Calkins and Ladd Franklin, Washburn earned her undergraduate degree from a women's college, Vassar. This is an important reminder of how minority-serving institutions played a crucial role in making higher education more accessible to those excluded from mainstream universities. Washburn's impact on psychology extended far beyond her research. She was elected president of the American Psychological Association in 1921, making her one of the first women to lead the organization. She also co-edited the American Journal of Psychology for over a decade, ensuring that emerging research continued to shape the field. Her contributions were so significant that she was inducted into the National Academy of Sciences in 1931, a rare honor for a woman at the time. Washburn's research was diverse, spanning perception, visual imagery, empathy, helping behavior, and consciousness, not just in humans, but also in animals. She became one of the leading voices in comparative psychology, a field that explores the similarities and differences between human and animal cognition. In 1908, she compiled and analyzed experimental research in comparative psychology and published The Animal Mind, a widely used text that examined the sensory and mental capacities of animals. This book was one of the first major works in the field and helped establish animal psychology as a legitimate area of study. Washburn's work helped legitimize comparative psychology, broaden our understanding of animal cognition, and pave the way for future generations of women in psychology. Let's fast forward to the 1920s, a time of significant social and academic change. It was during this period that Francis Sumner made history as the first African American to earn a PhD in psychology in 1920. His journey was far from easy. Despite facing racial barriers in higher education, Sumner persevered and carved out a legacy that would pave the way for future Black psychologists. He began his graduate studies at Clark University in 1917, working under G. Stanley Hall, one of the most influential figures in American psychology. However, in 1918, his studies were interrupted when he was drafted into World War I. While serving in Germany, he took the opportunity to learn German, a skill that would later prove valuable in his academic career. After being discharged in 1919, he returned to Clark University and completed his doctorate just 1 year later, officially earning his PhD in 1920. From 1928 to 1954, Sumner chaired the psychology department at Howard University, one of the leading historically Black universities in the country. He established influential bachelor's and master's degree programs to expand psychology education. His research addressed critical social issues, including racial bias, religion, and justice. He mentored and inspired the next generation of Black psychologists, including two figures who would play a pivotal role in the civil rights movement, Kenneth B. Clark and Mamie Phipps Clark. Sumner's impact stretched beyond his lifetime. By building a strong academic foundation at Howard University, he helped break racial barriers in psychology and inspired research that challenged racial segregation in education. Throughout his career, Sumner wrote over 2,000 abstracts for respected journals, including the Journal of Social Psychology and Psychology Bulletin. His scholarly work helped make psychological research more accessible and widely recognized. Sumner critically analyzed the theories of both Freud and Adler, exploring their differing views on personality and human behavior. Here is an excerpt from one of his articles where he describes the famous feud between Freud and Adler. Kenneth B. Clark and Mamie Phipps Clark were trailblazing American psychologists whose work left a lasting impact on both psychology and civil rights. The two met at Howard University in the 1930s, where they studied under Francis Sumner, the first African American to earn a PhD in psychology. Under his mentorship, they earned their bachelor's and master's degrees, developing a passion for applying psychology to real-world issues. In 1937, they married, becoming not only life partners but also research collaborators dedicated to using psychology as a tool for social change. Their journey was just beginning, and their contributions would soon help reshape American history. Kenneth B. Clark was a pioneer in the field, breaking racial barriers at some of the most prestigious institutions in the United States. In 1940, Clark became the first African American to earn a Ph.D. in psychology at Columbia University, a significant achievement in a time of widespread racial discrimination in higher education. Just 2 years later, he made history again, becoming the first African American to receive tenure as a psychology professor at City College of New York. He would dedicate over 3 decades to teaching, mentoring, and advancing the field of psychology there. And in 1971, his impact reached even further. Clark became the first African American president of the American Psychological Association. His leadership symbolized a new era of inclusion and recognition for Black psychologists. Through persistence and dedication, Kenneth B. Clark reshaped the landscape of psychology, paving the way for future generations of scholars and activists. In 1943, Mamie Phipps Clark became the second African American to earn a Ph.D. in psychology at Columbia University, following in the groundbreaking footsteps of her husband, Kenneth B. Clark. But their work extended far beyond academia. Together, they used psychology to make a real difference in their community. In the 1940s, the Clarks founded the Northside Center for Child Development, a community center in New York dedicated to improving the quality of life for young African American children. Their mission was clear: to provide mental health services, educational support, and social programs to address the unique challenges faced by minority children. As psychologists, the Clarks also conducted research on racial bias in education and child development. They found that the struggles minority children faced weren't just individual problems. They were shaped by social, economic, and institutional forces. Their work emphasized that solutions needed to happen on multiple levels, both individual and societal. Addressing racial disparities in education required systemic change. Decades later, their vision continues. The Northside Center remains a vital resource for children and families in New York City, proving that the Clarks' legacy lives on, not just in textbooks, but in real-world impact. In the early 20th century, schools in the United States were heavily segregated. Black and white children attended separate schools that were supposed to be equal, but were anything but. Black schools often lacked resources, had outdated materials, and were in poor condition compared to white schools. But the effects of segregation ran even deeper than just school conditions. It affected children's self-perception and identity. This was the social backdrop for one of the most influential psychological studies in American history, the Clark doll studies. In the 1930s, the Clarks set out to explore a critical question: how did racial segregation impact the self-perception of children? Their research would later play a major role in shaping the civil rights movement and transforming American education. They designed a series of experiments and compared the self-perceptions of Black and white children in segregated schools in Washington, D.C., with those in integrated schools in New York. Their results, published in 1939 and 1940, revealed crucial information about how children perceive themselves. Let's take a closer look. The Clarks designed a series of experiments to understand how segregation impacted the self-image of Black children. They placed 2 dolls before each child, one with white skin and blonde hair, the other with brown skin and black hair. Then they asked a series of questions. Which doll is the nice doll? Which doll is the bad doll? Which doll do most people like? Which doll do you like? Which doll looks like you? A majority of the children, including Black children, identified the white doll as the nice doll and the black doll as the bad one. Even more troubling, when asked which doll looked like them, some Black children hesitated or even refused to answer. Their research led them to a powerful and troubling conclusion. School segregation was not just about physical separation, it was about psychological harm. Through their doll studies, The Clarks found that many black children associated positive qualities with white dolls and negative qualities with black dolls. This response was not accidental. It reflected how systemic racism and segregation shaped black children's self-perception. In segregated schools, black children internalized the message that they were less valued in society. The Clarks concluded that segregation damaged identity development by making black children question their worth. It influenced not just how they saw themselves, but how they believed others saw them, leading to lower self-esteem, self-doubt, and internalized inferiority. The Clarks' work showed that psychology could reveal the deep and lasting effects of discrimination. Their research remains a crucial reminder that identity is shaped by our environment, and that equality in education is more than access. It's about dignity, self-worth, and the right to develop a strong and positive sense of self. For decades, segregation in American schools was upheld under the doctrine of separate but equal, established by Plessy v. Ferguson in 1896. But by the mid-20th century, psychologists Kenneth and Mamie Phipps Clark provided scientific evidence that segregation was not only unequal, but deeply harmful. The Clarks' research, particularly their doll studies, played a key role in the landmark Supreme Court case Brown v. Board of Education of Topeka in 1954. Their studies showed that segregation harmed black children's self-esteem, reinforcing feelings of inferiority from an early age. The Supreme Court justices took note. Chief Justice Earl Warren referenced the Clarks' findings in the court's unanimous decision, stating that separating children solely based on race generated a sense of inferiority that may affect their hearts and minds in a way unlikely ever to be undone. With this historic decision, Brown v. Board of Education overturned Plessy v. Ferguson, declaring segregation in public schools unconstitutional. The ruling set the stage for desegregation across the United States and became a catalyst for the broader civil rights movement. Thanks to the Clarks' research, psychology became a powerful tool for social justice, proving that science could influence policy and shape a more equitable society. The legacy of Brown v. Board of Education lives on today, reminding us of the profound impact research can have in the fight for equality.